Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman, and yes, it's Wednesday. It's time for the last frame. And for those of you that are here at 5:45 p.m., thanks for showing up early. Got a little tight schedule tonight. I'm doing a camera club presentation in Princeton, New Jersey tonight at 7 o'clock. So I need a few minutes between the last frame and the camera club presentation to go ahead and get things reset and set up so that I can do a great presentation. So I didn't want to miss out on tonight. I didn't want to skip, so we're going to start a few minutes early. And honestly, tonight is kind of the wrap-up as we talk about feathering. So it's your night, your questions. I've got some stuff I want to show you. I'm going to show you some cool little tricks, but I want to make sure that you guys are walking away from this three-part series with a great understanding of what feathering really is, when you might use it, and how you can benefit from it. In the meantime, if you're here, please do me a favor. Go ahead and leave me a little note there in the chat window. Let me know you're here and where you're from. And if you're watching this on the replay, no problem. Go ahead, leave a comment below the video. It's always cool to see where people are tuning in from. Cass is here, I believe from down under. William's here in Ottawa. David, San Diego. Robert in New Jersey. Lynn in New York. All of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame live each week. Thank you for that. So just a couple quick little notes here for you. If you guys get bored of me talking tonight, you can check this out while I'm talking, or maybe better yet, wait till afterwards. But made some changes on my website, and I'll show you where they are. I'll show you what they are, and it's something that might actually interest you. In the past on my website, if you clicked on my portfolio link, all you were able to see were more recent fashion portraits and beauty portraits, similar to the ones that you're seeing on the screen now. The reason for that is that when I became an Olympus visionary about 5 years ago, all of my Nikon pictures needed to go away, right? I wasn't using Nikon anymore, and since I was just promoting Olympus, and for 5 years, that's what I've been shooting, are the beauty and fashion portraits. But obviously, I've been taking pictures for a lot longer than 5 years. So now that I am no longer an Olympus ambassador, my website now includes images that are shot with Olympus, shot with Sony, both Sony versions from 6 years ago and Sony versions from today. Also Nikon, several different models ranging from the D1 to the D300 to the D1H, D1X, the D800, I think it's D750's in there. And also, believe it or not, there's even an image on the website now shot with a Pentax. Can you believe that? So anyway, now if you mouse over the images tab, it no longer says portfolio, it says images. You'll notice there's book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are even some fine art nudes, behave, right? Abstracts and shot for fun. So the added categories are images that are some fashion images, some commercial advertising images, some lifestyle images. So a lot of stuff of mine that you may not have ever seen. So there you go. You can check it out. When you go to the pages, click on them. The images go full screen. You can use your arrow keys. You can tab through it, click the arrows. You can swipe if you're on your phone. So a lot of cool information there. Also, one last piece of announcements, presentations tab, upcoming presentations. February 28th, March 1st, I will be at WPPI in Las Vegas. Looks like everything's headed in the right direction. We should be able to do the show safely, even if we are masked, that's fine. I am going to share a link in the chat window for you that will allow you to get a free expo pass or save $40 off a conference pass if you use that link to sign up. So I would love to see some of you in Las Vegas. Hopefully that's going to work out. And then, and I was not prepared, I should have the link here. I apologize. On March 11th and 13th, and I'm going to go ahead. In fact, you know what? Bear with me 1 second here. I can't believe I didn't have this ready. So let me get this information. I am going to be presenting, and this is one I expect to see all of you at because it's free and it's virtual, okay? I'm going to be presenting at an event called the Visual Storytellers Conference. And this is the first time that I will be presenting for this organization. So I'm kind of really looking forward to it. I'm going to share a link with you here. And again, free registration. You watch it online. I'll be doing 2 presentations. Let's see here, storytelling conference. There we go. And boom. I will also add these when we're done later tonight. I'll add these links into the description below the video. But I'm going to be presenting on March 11th, Shoot Beauty, the psychology and techniques behind shooting beauty. And then on Sunday the 13th, for those of you that are trying to make some money, if you've got all the business you need, don't attend this presentation. That's the name of the presentation. So again, both of them are free. You can actually register for this whole conference for free. Check it out. It's a good one. Some great speakers involved. You don't want to miss out on that. So that's coming up. All right. So, boy, we got a lot of people tuning in here. I'm glad you were all able to make it early. Thank you. And I see this message here from Cloud Strife. Let me just go ahead. We'll toot my horn a little bit there. Cloud Strife, thank you so much for the kind words. My latest achievement. For those of you that don't know what that's referring to, if you follow me on social media, I recently was bestowed the title from PPA of photographer craftsman or craftsman photographer. So that means I get to put little letters after my name, CR.PHOTOG, period. And basically, photographer craftsman is given as a recognition of accomplishments beyond the camera, meaning dedication to education, furthering the photography industry, helping others, mentoring, etc. So it's an honor that I'm really, really excited about because it really reflects the work that I'm doing now and have been doing for quite some time. And for that, honestly, I have all of you to thank. Okay? All right. So we've been talking about feathering. Hopefully, especially if you've checked in on the last 2 weeks of feathering, I'm hoping that I have maybe kind of, shall we say, dispelled a few rumors, misconceptions, wrong ideas maybe about feathering, when to use it, how to use it, what's it for. And I'm not going to lie, for me, the big takeaway that I hope all of you take away from these discussions that we've been having about feathering and from all the stuff I've talked about in the last 2 Last Frame episodes and then tonight, the takeaway is experiment and practice, and experiment and practice, and experiment and practice. Because literally, gang, I could sit here, and I'm not bragging, I'm just keeping it real. I could sit here for the next 3 hours and walk through all kinds of crazy scenarios and shortcuts and problem-solving solutions with lighting. That's because I'm older than sin and I've been taking pictures forever. That's why I can do that. So it's the practice, it's the experience. I cannot stress enough. I know quite a few of you have sent me messages, have reached out, you've commented in the chats. I appreciate that you feel that this 3-part series has been really beneficial and that you've learned a lot from it. But please believe me when I say you haven't really learned it if you don't get out and try it and experiment with it and do some practicing and some failing to get a sense of how this works, because it's really what it's all about. It's all just simply problem-solving things, right? So we did portraits. That was week 1. Last week we did kind of the big group, like the wedding scenario group, right? We had a couple people that asked questions about the idea, well, like, what if you're, in front of big glass windows and things like that? That was one of the questions that came up because obviously I wasn't able to replicate that in the software that we're using. The simple solution in cases like that is take your lights a little bit higher, which honestly is no different than, in that bridal party, or if you're photographing the portrait, or if you're doing a couple like we're going to play with here. If one of them's wearing glasses, take your lights a little bit higher. Most of the time, you will be able to solve the problem just by taking your lights a little higher. Now, you notice I keep saying a little higher. You have to finesse it. You want to find the balance point, because if you just go too high, then you're going to start to create heavy shadows under the nose. You're going to make the eyes look deep set because you'll be creating shadows under the eye sockets. You'll potentially create shadows underneath the eyeglasses that you're trying not to get reflections in. especially if you've got your modifier too close to your subject. You create heavier shadows underneath the chin. So it's about finding the balance point. One of the things that's also very helpful if you've got a subject with glasses is make sure that they are not lifting their chin up. If they're lifting their chin up, there's a higher likelihood they're going to catch some kind of reflection from the light. So you want them looking straight ahead. I have a video on my YouTube channel about photographing people with glasses. Check that out. You'll find when you watch that video, I am not a fan of, tilt the glasses forward and make them wear the glasses that way, that kind of stuff. In theory, that works if you don't overdo it. The problem is the entire time you're trying to photograph the person, they are extremely aware of the fact that their glasses are, up higher on the back, in the back than they normally would be, and they're tilted forward. And it just simply feels really, really awkward. You don't get great images by doing things that make your subjects feel awkward, right? So the best solution is for you to work with your lighting to eliminate that. And in addition to lighting, it's in camera angle. If you shoot from a lower angle, when you've got a person with glasses, you run a higher risk of picking up reflection in the lenses because remember, light travels in a straight line, okay? So if you shoot eye level or maybe just a smidge high, depending on the type of photograph, it's not going to be a good idea to shoot down, right? So, but if you shoot at eye level or just a smidge high, that can also be enough to be able to get rid of any glare. So it's not as simple as just lift the light or just drop the chin. It's a combination of all of those things, right? All right, so I promised that we would talk a little bit about couples because we kind of done the two extremes. We did single portraits. We did a group with, a bridal party with 10 people. So now similar setup, similar gear. I've got a couple standing here. I've got one light setup, which right at the moment, this is the 36-inch octabox that you see. In fact, here, if I spin this around and we go around to the back, you can see where the light is in relationship to the couple, okay? Right above me, you can see how that lighting looks, all right? Now, what do we have in terms of this image? So we have a couple of things that are worth looking at. Number one, if you look up above me, you'll notice we do get the heavy, fall off back here, and it's not as dark on this side of it. I honestly like that sometimes. Not everybody does, and let's forget about what we like. Sometimes it's just not appropriate for the image. So that's one of the things that we want to be concerned with. But more importantly, we want to be concerned with the idea that her arm, her face are actually creating some pretty deep shadows on him. Now, the good news is, and again, the modifier is only about 5 feet from the two of them. The good news is we don't have a hard line shadow, right? It's not like a really defined harsh shadow. So again, it's kind of one of those things. It's not bad, but it's also not great, right? So the first thing that we're able to do, if we want, we can go ahead. I'm going to discard that change that I made. We can go ahead and we can feather that light and it gets softer. So at this point now, compared to where we were just a minute ago, let me spin that around, turn the background off. You can see I've basically aimed the light across the front. So notice it's not aimed directly at them. It's aimed just past them. They're seeing a smaller sliver of light, but it's not the center brightest part of the light. So it is a softer light. You'll notice when you look up above, in fact, let me turn off that viewfinder hash. There we go. When we look at the space between their heads, when we look at his jacket, the shadows are softer. Notice also what happened by doing that. Look at the background. The background got lighter. So let's just take a quick peek at those two pictures, right? Here was the first one with the 36-inch octabox aimed directly at them. And as you've seen me do in every lighting tutorial that I've done, the octabox is set so that it's, just below chin level at the bottom, meaning 2/3 of that light is above their heads. But things get pretty deep and dark in here and behind her arm. When I feather it, which is where you saw it just a moment ago, it opens that up. And we also pick up a little bit more detail in the background. Not a ton, but a little, okay? So, in fact, I apologize here. Let me do that. There we go. That's like, why is that looking different? There we go. That's why it was looking different. Okay, so still not necessarily perfect for all situations. It's simply a matter of how can we soften the light on the two of them. Now, I showed you a little trick the last time that we did the portraits. If you are okay with a darker background, in fact, is this where I have it? Yeah, we'll work with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add a third variation in here. What I've done this time, and I'll show you how I'm going to deal with the background. I've actually backed the light up a little bit more, and I've moved them further from the background. So this is another option. Now, of course, this option, let's move this over so you guys can see it. This option requires that you have a little bit more space because we are now outside that 10-foot diameter circle. In fact, I've added pretty much another 5 feet. So instead of a 10-foot running distance, I need a 15-foot running distance between my background and my lights. You're not always going to be able to do that, right? But sometimes you can. So by doing that, by backing that light up a little bit and moving it in a little closer, in other words, closer to the camera, we're able to put more detail in there. Notice now we can see her ear. We have got softer shadows there. And even, I can feather this light a little bit more. And watch what happens when I feather. So there we are. In fact, here, let me just click the button so we get it right. There it is, aimed directly at them. We have the darker shadowing down here. The background is clearly lighter on camera right than it is on camera left at the top. If I feather, and we'll let that settle in, we're able to even out the background here. We still have the darker part in the bottom. So again, all options. And keep in mind, we could also add more lights. We're still doing this with just one light, no reflectors, no nothing, right? Even if you have something as simple as a V-flat, right? You could add in, let's see, do I have one here? Yeah. If we had a V-flat to work with, we could bring a V-flat in right out of the frame, and that's going to soften that background a little. Still not completely even, but that's a start. We could also, for that matter, bring it up alongside the subjects, which is going to even out the lighting on their faces a little bit more. Notice it kind of makes that light a little flat. So watch up here with the reflector in, light on their faces, it's a little bit flat. It's got kind of that Peter Hurley headshot vibe, right? It's almost like they're kind of cut out. There's no shadow. Everything's even. And if that's your thing, right? That's cool. But now if I go ahead and I turn that off and we look up there, you notice now we get a little bit more depth. We don't have harsh shadows. It's not bad shadows. I actually consider it to be good shadows, but it's all a matter of taste and preference. So I do want to go back really quick. I'm going to discard that set of changes that I made there. I want to go back to this setup here, and I want to show you one other little trick that we can do with the background. So I'm going to turn this way, and I had shown you this before with a single portrait. I'll show it to you now with a couple because you can still do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the background at an angle. By doing that, I want you to notice how it's starting to even out. And it gets most even there. So now, of course, I'm off center a little bit. So I'm just going to slide it over and boom. Still have the shadow down in the back. That's absolutely correct. But now I've been able to even that background out a little bit. And also I'm able to get a little bit brighter background by doing it. I can also simply, let's see, Saskally, audio is clipping. Ooh, it's a little hot. Let's see here. I get excited and I talk louder than where I did my volumes to start. So we'll see if that helps. So if I bring it a little bit closer, okay, I am going to lighten it just a tad. Still going to have that shadow. But again, those are all options. Remember, if we add more lights, so we're going to take this a step further. And again, we could do this for hours, okay? But let's go ahead and let's add in, let's see, what do we have here? Well, I thought I had other lights there. I don't. So let me apply that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in another light right here. We're going to make it 200 watt seconds. So this would be the equivalent of me using one of my Godox 8200 lights. And a couple options. First one is I'm going to move it to the back of the circle. Let me set that up so you can see. So I've got it right on my 10-foot diameter circle. So notice again, everything is, in that 10-foot radius. Now, when we look at the rim light that we're getting on this guy here, it's a little hot. So we're gonna dial it down. We want it to be subtle. So we can create a little separation there. We also get, if you look up here, we get a nice little highlight line down the edge of his jacket. The key is subtle. A rookie mistake that people get or make in a situation like this is they come in and they think it looks cool and they make those lights really hot. That's not that cool. Now, another thing I want you to notice, and I'm going to leave it bright so you can see it. This is not the intended goal, right? But I wanted to make sure that you could see all of the highlight. So you see how I've got quite a bit on the edge of the shoulder here. I've got his face. I've got a line that's ever so slight, just a tiny little bit that is on the top of the shoulder. The reason for that being so tiny is the height of that light. So all we need to do is raise that light up a little bit higher. And now notice we get a nice even highlight line. We're not going to want it that bright, of course, right? We're going to turn it back down. We're going to make it subtle. And there we go. So that starts to create some separation for us. If you wanted that highlight line to run the whole way down his arm, the challenge that we have at the moment is this light is only about 3.5 to 4 feet away from them. It's pretty close. So there's two ways that we can get that light to highlight more of him. First one, let's go ahead and take this light and move it way back to here. And we'll turn the power up. And now, again, I'm going to exaggerate so that you can see where it's hitting. If I exaggerate, you can see now I'm getting the highlight all the way down the side of the arm. I'm getting it on the hand. I'm getting it on the pants legs, the inside pants leg. So I've got the highlight everywhere that I want it. If I go up a little bit higher, we get it back on the jacket edge. And we even get a little tiny bit on her hand, which could be nice as long as it's not too bright. So now we go ahead and we turn it back down to a subtle accent, and that's it. So Phil's trying to show off a little bit. He's jumping ahead. The other option, since I like to work in that 5-foot circle, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to bring this back down a little bit. And instead of working with just the silver, the 7-inch reflector, which is kind of the stock standard size reflector, right? Instead of working with that, I'm going to go ahead and indeed I'm going to switch to a small strip box. And when I say small, we're going to do, we'll do like 12 by 47. It does not need to be massive. But you'll notice just by doing that, look at the frame above me. In that 10-foot circle, it is now in my shot. So I am going to need a little bit of extra space to be able to get that guy out of my shot. And I'm going to need to pull my power up a little bit because the softbox is going to take some light away. I know somebody's going to say, what about a grid? I don't need a grid. And that's mainly because at the moment, remember the angle on the background because I wanted to even out the background, right? So I'm not lighting any of that background. If I turn the modifier more to the left, it's going to light the background. But right now, I don't need a grid. I'm not getting any flare in my camera. I'm just lighting the side of them. And I could even afford to bring this forward just a little bit more. Maybe right in about there. Again, subtle on the highlights. We don't want it to be too big. I am going to take it up a little bit higher. And that gives us a little bit more control and it spreads the light out a little bit further. You'll notice I still don't have much of a highlight down here. So if I needed that, if that was important to me, then I'm going to need something more along the lines of like a 60-inch strip box, a big one, if I can't back the light up. So there's always, 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 always more than one way to do things. It's kind of like working in Photoshop. When it comes to doing lighting, gang, it's really a lot like working in Photoshop. There's 10 different ways to do everything. So the challenge is before you run out and buy a modifier because, oh, look, if I use a 16-inch strip modifier, I can get the whole side of the guy's, body lit. Well, you may not need that 16-inch modifier if you're able to back your light up a little bit more. It all depends on the amount of space that you have. That's going to be key, right? And then obviously, we could go to town at this point. I mean, we could add another light in. I'm going to throw that one in there. I'm going to go ahead and aim this at the background now. And now, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I can do. I could go ahead and, I can create color. Let's take this really, really close and we'll get a little bit of glow going on there. We're going to back it up just a bit more. There we go. So, I'm not doing any special modifiers. All I just did was put a gel on it. Done. In fact, actually, that one's not working out too good because it's in the shot. So let's move it over. There we go. Now we'll adjust that. That's better. Okay. And then from there, we can play with the power, everything that we want to do. Right. So we could go on with this like legit forever in terms of variations, options. But I want you to understand the key when you're doing these things, it's what's happening with this key light. The key light is absolutely the key. It's the most important light you're going to work with because this is a light that's going to determine how good or bad these people actually look. Okay? So, and Phil, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor here. Let me teach all your messages. If I read them, I can't teach. Let me teach. If you're here, go ahead and listen. It sounds like you know what you're doing, but you never know. You might pick something up, okay? So, all right. Now, we're going to head down the line here to, let's get rid of that. We're just going to hit a full-length version of this. So, by now, you should have most of this figured out, right? So, for this one, I can't fit this all in a 10-foot circle. We need a little bit more space, right? If we're going to fit this in a 10-foot circle, we're going to wind up doing all kinds of distortion and things like that. So I still have them standing in the middle of the 10-foot circle. I've rolled my gray backdrop down and I've backed my light up a little bit more. Personal preference thing here. Let me show this to you because I had somebody ask me the other day when I was doing a similar scenario to this is why not for that shadow that's in the background that you see there? Why not go ahead and move it over closer and at least you kind of tuck more of the shadow behind them. To me, so this is personal preference, but you'll find more photographers will agree with this than not. That shadow that you're seeing now behind them actually looks very awkward. It just kind of looks like sloppy lighting. By coming over here and having the shadow trail off more, it looks natural. It looks more of what our eyes would expect to see. I do need to bring that light up a little bit higher. Yeah, there we go. So that's my normal kind of space. So the challenge I have now is by moving the light more to camera right, I have also deepened the shadows between them and between their heads. So if I go ahead and I feather, now of course that's going to reduce my exposure a little bit, but then we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring up the power of the flash just a little. I am able to even the light out on the two of them, soften the shadow, solve the problem, right? So again, all of this is kind of tight space lighting, simple lighting. I also had somebody reach out this week and say, well, what about like when you're doing the feathering, would it make more sense to put a grid on it? Is that going to help what's going on in the background of shadows? And unfortunately, no, putting a grid on this is absolutely not the answer. Am I able to do a grid here? I am able to do a grid. So we're going to keep the diffuser. So I do the grid. You notice I lose that much more light yet. So I've got to power my light up pretty much the full power now at these settings, okay? But I want you to notice how now what's happened is I've got this hard edge of light that's coming down on camera right, because I focus the light more, the shadows, look how hard the shadow is along her arm, right? So understand that grids are really not your friend most of the time. Grids do have their place, they do have their purpose, and they accomplish two things. One, they always make light harder, because all the grid is doing, it's restricting the spread. So by restricting the spread, the light travels further at a brightness before it begins its fall off, the inverse square law, right? So you get a harsher shadow. That's it. That's the primary thing that a grid does. It narrows the spread, which is going to make the shadows more defined. If you're in a really, really tight spot and you're trying to keep light from hitting a background or from hitting something else in the shot, grids can be very helpful by eliminating the spread, or not eliminating it. There's no way to eliminate spread. Excuse me, that was a poor choice of word. All light spreads. As soon as it leaves the light source, it spreads. That's physics. That's the inverse square law. But to minimize the amount of spread, grids will help you do that, to be able to keep light off certain things. But with your key light, you're generally not going to want a grid for the purpose of keeping light off a background or off really anything, because the whole idea is to light your subjects with your key light. So unless you're looking for a more defined set of shadows and a harsher light, and there are times for harsh light. I'm not a big fan of harsh light, but there are times, and there are photographers that do some beautiful work intentionally with harsh light, then you can go ahead and use a grid. But otherwise, for me, a grid is definitely not my friend. I'm going to work without a grid pretty much all the time. So let me discard that. Let's switch over to this one. So there's a couple ways that we can deal with this. One is, notice I've actually started to tilt the light down further. I don't have it aimed directly at their heads. I've actually aimed the light lower. But what this does, compared to here, let's come back, okay? Here you see I've got the light aimed right at their faces, but look at how the light falls off from top to bottom. Things get pretty dark down here. By aiming it down, I have balanced the light from top to bottom much better than what I had originally. And then we can take it one step further if we go to an umbrella, and similarly, notice how I've aimed that down. I've got it up as high as I can go, and I have it aimed down. Look at how much softer the light is in general, right? So there's the octabox aimed at their eyes, my normal height placement, 2/3 of the light above their heads, right? Then if I aim it down to feather, I get much better balance top to bottom. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better. It doesn't jump out at you as like, wow, look how much the light falls off, right? Okay? And then if we go to an umbrella, we're able to soften it dramatically, okay? So Phil had a question here, and Phil, I've talked about this a lot, so I will give you the short version of this. But the question is, when you're working solo, what can you do about keeping the talent occupied as they wait? So first of all, I always love when I hear people's talent. Stop thinking of people as talent. That's like industry lingo that sounds like somebody who's trying to sound cool. I have never in my life referred to a subject as talent. And keep in mind, I did paid commercial advertising work for a lot of years. They're not talent. They're people. They're humans. They're people that you're collaborating with. So there's the answer, Phil, right? Right out of the box, when you think of them as a subject, that's like an object. When you think of them as talent, they're talent. They have a job to do. Do the job. You just make your job harder. So first of all, you should have your lighting set up before your talent walks onto the set. You should have your lighting set up. You should have it tested. You should be good to go. Anytime you're doing a session with human beings, the first set of shots are the most important ones. They're not going to be the best ones. At least I really hope for your sake they're not the best ones. But they're the most important ones. The first ones, They're the ones that set the tone. So if you let your people arrive and, you're all Mr. Personality and you talk and you chat and everything's great and then everybody gets dressed and then they come up on the set, you're like, okay, so just chill for a minute because I got to do some test shots. And you're like, nah, that's not so good. Let's move this around. Let's turn the power up. Another test shot. Oh, crap. No, that's not it. Let me go adjust it. If you're doing that, you suck. Like, honest, you just do because there's no consideration for your subject. You're not prepared. You didn't put any preparation in. And photographers, this applies to all of you. I'm not picking on Phil here. That applies to everybody. Your first shot, portrait, couples, group, I don't care what it is. You need to have everything set up before your subject walks in front of the camera. That way, you start shooting right away and you're getting pictures. They are not going to be your best pictures of the day because you have to go find those pictures. This is just your first idea of poses, background, lighting. But you're shooting. That boosts your confidence, which is very important because you feel like, okay, I'm making progress. This is good, right? And more importantly, it boosts your subject's confidence. Confidence in themselves because they're not hearing people calling them talent and they're not hearing all kind of cool lingo. They're simply hearing click, 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 click. And if they're hearing click, 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 their brain is saying, wow, it must be going pretty good because he's taking a lot of pictures. Right? So they're hearing click, click, click. And while they're hearing click, 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 they're thinking, hey, it's doing good. That's also increasing their confidence in you as to how well it's going. Then, by now, Phil, you should be saying, yeah, Joe, I got that part. But what about then when they go and change outfits and I'm getting ready to do the second shot and it's a different background, different lighting? Easy. First of all, if you're putting humans, and by the way, Phil, especially if you're shooting talent, if you're shooting talent without a makeup artist, you're not a pro. You are not doing professional quality work. You're not even trying to be professional. Because the simple fact of the matter is you are not going to get top-notch work without a makeup artist. Every image that you see on my website in that new portfolio that I was talking about, every single images over the last 20 years in that portfolio, there's not a single one there that did not involve a makeup artist. Many involved a makeup artist and a hairstylist. Some involved a makeup artist and a hairstylist and a clothing stylist. All of it. So the fact of the matter is, you've got plenty of time in between shots to get things set up, do your test shots, take your meter readings, etc. You could do your test shots with a mannequin. If you are fortunate enough to work with an assistant, which it doesn't sound like you are, Phil, and that's cool. Believe me, I don't like working with assistants because I, too, actually don't have a large shooting space. My shooting space downstairs, it's only 13 feet wide by 25 feet long. That's not big at all. And I've got a 7.5-foot ceiling. So all these images that you see me do, they're done in a very small space. So you can go ahead and do your setups with a mannequin and check your exposure, check your lighting, all that kind of stuff before your folks come back out of the makeup chair. Or use a light meter. Use a light meter properly, and you can set your light up. You can check everything. So the only thing you need basically is one test shot to make sure that your light placement is where it should be. Okay? And believe me, even with the best of planning, there are times where we're still going to have a subject, a person, standing on a set while we're trying to solve a problem. It happens. When that happens, I don't stop talking. I literally have verbal diarrhea. I just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. So I have to be able to multitask. I am going to keep them engaged so they do not have the opportunity to be bored. I am going to keep them engaged so that they do not have the opportunity to have their minds wander to somewhere else, potentially to problems that they have at home, things that they're struggling with, stuff that is going to negatively impact their mood, because just life can do that. I want them present in what I'm doing. So I'm going to talk non-stop. And if I'm struggling with something, I'm not going to do the fake it till you make it thing. I'm not going to try and impress the crap out of them. Nothing that you're going to do in a studio is going to impress somebody short of treating them properly, treating them like a human being, showing empathy. Nothing you're going to do is going to impress them. What impresses people is great images at the end. That's what counts. So if I'm having a problem, I'm going to own the problem. If something's not doing what I want it to do and I can't quite find that solution, possibly because I'm talking too much while I'm trying to figure it out, but that's why we practice in the first place, I'm going to be honest about it. I'm going to own that. And I'm going to talk them through things. And I'm going to explain what's happening. I need my human subjects, not talent. I need them to be collaborators with me. They need to be a part of what I'm doing because they are every bit as important as I am. I can't make that picture without them. So that's not a problem for me in the sense that I talk to them and keep them occupied. I make them a part of the process. But I also respect their time and I prepare in advance so that I don't have a lot of downtime. Okay? All right. So, again, the point behind going to this umbrella, I wanted to show you this for a couple of reasons. One, you notice how much more even the light is with the umbrella. So, hopefully you guys have noticed that I tend to favor umbrellas. So many of you make your lighting journey 10 times harder than it needs to be by buying really, really fancy modifiers that are really, really expensive, all different shapes, all different sizes, parabolic, this, that, blah, 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 blah. And then you can't get consistently good light out of them because what you're doing is you're buying a light because some idiot on YouTube took a picture with one and it looked cool. And you're like, ooh, that's how I want my pictures to look. So you buy that modifier and you think that your pictures are going to look that way. And then your pictures don't look that way. Because what you didn't pay attention to was how high does he set his light? How close to the subject is his light, et cetera, et cetera. And then in the meantime, there's people like me that'll see that picture and say, sure, give me a shoot through umbrella and I'll make that picture. So learn how the tools work and you'll need fewer tools. That much I promise you. Okay? So, similarly here, let me just see what else I had set up. I went ahead and I did a couple shots with a bigger modifier because I know that some people are going to ask, okay, what about a bigger modifier? So indeed, still backing the light up, going to a bigger modifier. I'm still not aiming it at their faces. I'm aiming down, so essentially I'm feathering, okay? I am able to get good light top to bottom without harsh shadows in between, all right? Just for the sake of getting really creative, it's a very different kind of light, but in a pinch, if I've got white walls and a white ceiling, I can even bounce it off. And notice what disappears at that point. The shadow behind them disappeared. Now, is this my favorite kind of light? Do I prefer this? No. But is it a workable light? Yes, it is a workable light, okay? The lighting is very even. Again, we're getting back to kind of that almost Peter Hurley kind of feel where it's a very flat, even light. Not a lot of depth to the lighting at all, okay? I do prefer to have a little bit more depth. And this has changed. I want to be really clear about this too, because I'm not talking trash about Peter Hurley. He makes a lot more money than I do. I'm saying it's the difference in the way they appear. If you look back at a lot of my work over the last 20 years, I didn't light as flat as what Peter Hurley does, but I light with very few shadows frequently. It's really only been in the last probably 5 years of my work that I've gone back to adding shadows in and creating depth with shadows, etc. It's never about a right or wrong. It's just not, okay? It is a creative choice, and the only evaluator that exists in this whole equation is it flattering to the subject? And by the way, ultimately, that decision is it flattering to the subject in their eyes? It doesn't matter if it's flattering in your eyes, right? It's up to the subject. Unless it's a commercial job and you do have talent, like Phil was saying, well then yes, they're not getting paid to have an opinion, but you still, the more you can get them to like what you're doing, the easier the job's going to be, right? Period. So Danny says he likes to talk about sports with the subjects or tell jokes to keep them engaged. Yeah, hey, dad jokes are making a huge comeback. So, you do a couple hours worth of dad jokes, right? But it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is that you're talking about. It doesn't matter how you do it, gang. And here's the thing. I will give you an example, since I'm talking about Peter Hurley a lot tonight. And again, I'm not kidding. The guy makes a lot more money than I do. So Peter Hurley is hands down like the greatest headshot photographer when it comes to actors, probably in the world, hands down. The fact that there are so many people shooting business headshots and portraits using his lighting, I personally, I'll get myself in trouble here, but I'm being honest. I personally find that unfortunate because it's not lighting that has emotion. It's very flat lighting, period. Okay. So many of the photographers that are part of Headshot Crew now, you see, it looks like they're cutting their subjects out with scissors, right? So anyway, here, hang on just one second, gang. There we go. Okay. Phil, you got to take a little bit of break, man. I asked you to take a little break, and you came right back and said, but you're going to keep talking. So I'm going to put you in a timeout there. Sorry, man. But if you have something to actually contribute or you need some help, then I'm there. But otherwise, just listen, right? I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to teach. In school, your teachers didn't let you talk back to them the whole time that you were talking. Did they? No, I know they didn't. Okay? So do me a favor, all right? Just listen. Listen. So for me, I prefer to see a little bit of depth. I prefer to use that lighting to get a little bit more emotion. At the end of the day, it all depends on why you're taking the picture. And that's the key. It's like when Peter Hurley's doing an acting headshot, that kind of lighting is exactly what casting directors want. It's exactly what people want to see. When we talk about using that kind of lighting for a business headshot, then it's completely subjective. If the client likes it, that's awesome. Period. Right? That's just how it works. Okay? So anyway, the point is every one of these lighting placements and then problems that we created and problems that we solved, there's 100 ways, if not 1,000 ways to do it. So it's a matter of putting in some practice, okay? Now, I do have one other little thing that I'm going to show you guys, but I will tell you, I've got like another little over 10 minutes here. If you have any questions, now is the time to go ahead and type your questions in. I will try and get them. Don't wait until right before 6:45 to type them in, because I'm going to have to bail out of here on time tonight because I have to reset for a presentation. But bear with me just one second. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to open another file here in the software that I was using, and I will show you another kind of cool little trick, because I promised you guys that I'd have a neat little trick for you here. So bear with me, and there it is. All right, cool. So let's switch to here. Let me switch back. So this is just, I actually stumbled across a really old image. An image that's like 15 years old. It's in my portfolio. And it reminded me of this little lighting trick. So I thought, you know what? I want to make sure that I show this off, because it's kind of one of those things. It's a little counterintuitive, but it actually gives you a lot of control, and it's something that you can experiment with and you can have a lot of fun with. So what I've done here, and obviously depending on your shooting space and what you have available, you may not be able to do this, but if you have a room with bare walls and solid color walls, it doesn't matter what color they are, but you can do this. So I've got one strobe with a 36-inch octabox. You can do bigger. You could do smaller, but I would say, if anything, do bigger. I've got the model leaning against the wall. I have the octabox on the side, and just to give you a sense of where it's located, it's in front of her, but it's aimed at the wall. You can see the hot spot on the wall, right? All the other placements the same. It's slightly above her, aimed down slightly. Cameras along the wall. So what we get here, and in this case, since it's a white wall, okay, what we get is that we've got lighter area in front, darker area in back. But we can also experiment with this. And when I say experiment, there's a couple different ways we can use this. We could take the light and we can aim it more directly at her and feather in the opposite direction. And now we get the darker edge on the side, which is starting to create depth and layers to the room and to the lighting. And then, you know, what I would do if I was shooting this is ever so slightly, I would tweak her pose so that I had her face a little bit more to the light. And that gives me a nice, soft, even light on her face. But here's what's cool about this setup now, right? I'm going to go ahead and let's just run down the road here a little bit. So there's the version where I've got it aimed towards the back wall. I'm going to go to another version here. Whoop, that's not it. This one's it. Yeah, here we go. Here's my other light. So I'm going to play around with the speed light here just to give you guys a sense. Do I have the extra? Oh, I do have the extra lights. We're going to do it here. Forget it. We're back to the strobe. So I've got that setup going. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in, let's turn that one off. I'm going to add in some color. So notice I added 2 rim lights, okay? One with blue on it, one with orange on it. And they're aimed back at the girl. So what I'm doing is I'm filling in color in the background and in the shadow area that's on the wall. Now, remember where we had the modifier to start? We went this direction, and we had it aimed here. If I do that, now I've got a situation where I'm putting deeper color into the background. I think for this, I would probably actually turn this light off for me. Just go with the color in the background. So what I'm doing here is a combination of things. Number one, I'm using my wall as a reflector. Okay, so it's a light colored wall. Keep in mind that if this person was leaning against a green wall or a beige wall or something like that, that's going to cause you color shift, right? So it needs to be a white or a gray wall. Okay, but white, super easy to do it with. So I'm using the wall as a reflector, which is giving me really nice light, but I still have depth. I've still got some shadow, still got depth to it, still got, you know, shadow underneath the chin. And then basically what I'm doing is wherever there happens to be shadow area, I'm going ahead and I'm putting color into that shadow area, right? And again, we can play with this and we can experiment with this pretty much like forever, okay? The potential are like literally practically endless. So it's just as simple as one light, super, super soft. And the image that go with that, I have a black and white version that I'll show you here. Let me just get that up onto the screen and go to my website. Images, I think it is book 3, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's book 4. I was wrong. Sorry, here we go. And so here is a shot that's done with that setup. So there's a black and white version, but there's a shot done with that setup. One nice simple catch light, super, super soft, easy. So it becomes all about your subject. It just really isolates your subject, makes it about the subject. Really, really nice light. Okay, so let's see here from Hector. Now that I see this example, I try here. Let me just put this on the screen so you guys can see it. I tried to do some color gels in a speed light, but the colors look very pastel. How would you make them more saturated, adding more gel? So Hector, it can depend on a couple of things. Number one, it could be the gels. If the gels that you are using are really, really thin, like you can see through them super easy. Like if you rest it on your hand and you look at it, you can still see like the lines in your fingerprints and that kind of stuff. The gel's probably too thin. It's not rich enough. Or indeed, it's potentially a pastel type color, right? If that's the case, then you're either going to want to double up on the gels to get a little bit more juice to it, a little bit more saturation, or get a set of gels with deeper saturation for sure. The other potential problem, Hector, is it depends on what you're trying to gel. So like even in here, let me go back. The example that I've got going on here, right? So remember, this wall that we're looking at is a white wall. Let me go ahead and take your question off. This is a white wall that we're looking at, right? So I'm putting this blue light. This one's turned off, so just ignore this one. Okay, in fact, here, let me make that disappear altogether. There we go. So that's gone. So we're just dealing with the two lights. And this is a fairly deep blue that I'm working with. You can see it's a nice rich blue. They call it dark blue. So that's a good color to work with. But I can't get really, really deep saturation, right? It's still, see, because when I turn it down, I kind of lose the color, right? And that's because the wall's white. If this wall, let's say this wall was a dark gray, okay? Now look what happens to that blue color, right? If I turn it up, I get really intense saturation. Turn it down, it's going to go to the black, but you get really, really intense saturation. So how do you deal with that if you have a white wall, right? So if you've got a white wall, which is where we were to start with, let's go back to the white, okay? How do we get that to be richer? The trick would be as follows. Let me back up. And again, it's going to depend on how much space that you have available. But if you can move your subject further away from that wall in the background, now of course I have to move the camera too. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's back away this way. And let's get my light back up to where my exposure is good. Notice now how I am able to get a little bit more color. It's still not as rich as the gray wall, but that's because I've made that background darker. I'm using the inverse square law, and at that distance, which is about 12 feet, very little of this light is getting closer. Now, even more so, if I took this light and I move it closer to my subject, right? I'm going to go a little bit lower there. And if I turn the power down to adjust the exposure, now notice how dark, Enigmagic, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Now notice how dark that background's gotten. So now I can start to get more intense color, right? So the simple way to think about it, Hector, and for all the rest of you, when you start playing with gels, and this is a starting point, right? So anybody that does a lot of color, crazy stuff like I do, they tend to cringe when I say this, but it's true. It's the best starting point. The easiest way to work with colored gels to begin with is make a shadow. You need a dark space. Aim that color gel at the dark space, and you're going to get more color. You're going to get richer color. That's the easiest place to start. Certainly there are times where you might want to use, the color gel as your key light, and you're going to blend colors. Again, just like what we've been doing, the possibilities are almost endless, legit, okay? But when you're just getting started, if you want to try and get rich, solid, vibrant color, the best thing to do is create a shadow, create a dark space where you want the color to be, and then you aim your color right into that space, and you'll be able to get the rich color. So Planet Media, the software that I'm using is called Elixir Software. Or excuse me, no, it's not. Sorry. It's called Set-A-Light 3D. It is by a company called Elixir Software. I'm going to share the link with you on the screen, or excuse me, in the chat right now. They do have a free download. So before you rush out and buy it thinking, oh my God, that's so cool, download the free trial. Try it out. It's kind of like Photoshop. It's got a learning curve, right? So you want to do, a little bit of work with it to make sure that you feel comfortable with it and can use it. And then 99% of you only need the basic version, which is a lot cheaper. It's $79, okay? And here, since I'm such a great guy, bear with me 1 second, and then I got to log off because I'm running out of time. I can give you guys a discount code. I don't make any money on this discount code. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that, but bear with me 1 second. Where are we at here? Oh, there it is. Okay, so, all right, I'll put this in the chat also. You can see a 15% discount if you buy it, but promise me, right? Again, remember, like I said, I don't make any money on it. So download the free trial, try it out first, before you decide to buy it. And one other thing you have to understand, this software will not make you better at lighting. This software, if you use it properly, will allow you to get a better grasp of things and will allow you to kind of get your head wrapped around stuff a little bit better. But at the end of the day, you got to go turn on some lights. You got to pick up the camera. You got to experiment. You got to actually put it to use. So yes, there's a lot of value in using software like that for planning and really building out a shot. But if you're going to use it for the purpose of learning about lighting and getting better at lighting, you got to actually go do the real thing as well. Otherwise, it's not going to help you out much. All right, gang. So thank you all. Oh, here, really quick. Aussie to you, and then I got to go. This question, unrelated to tonight's discussion, is there any auto cropping software out there for helping with processing high volume portraits and headshots? Auto cropping. You know what? Aussie to you, not that I'm aware of, but make sure you tune in next week. And I know a guy. I'll make a phone call, and this guy will know. So tune in next week and I'll see if I can find out anything, but I have not seen anything that's kind of auto cropping. And honestly, I'd be a little bit worried about auto cropping unless you are extremely consistent in terms of how you're doing your compositions and that. So let me see what I can find out for you. Tune in next week. So gang, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found all this feathering stuff helpful. Next week, maybe we'll take a break and we'll do some general stuff, but then we'll dig into some more lighting stuff because I've been getting some really good questions sent to me via messaging. Phil, if you're still here, I see I got a thumbs down. I'm sure that's from Phil. I'm sorry, man. I hope you understand. This is about learning, right? You can't learn when you're talking or typing. That's all. Look, I'm sorry, okay? But anyway, gang, thank you so much. Remember, pick up that camera and shoot something because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios, gang. Have a great week. Take care.